Besides being spectacular, these movies were the biggest hits in the history of cinema. Get ready to find out which ones in this. Top 10 highest grossing movies of all time. Number 10, Star Wars: The Force Awakens. It took 10 years after Revenge of the Sith for Star Wars to release a new movie in 2015. The Force Awakens is set 30 years after the events of 1983's Return of the Jedi and marked the beginning of a new trilogy that soon excited Star Wars fans around the world, grossing the intergalactic sum of $2.213 billion. By the way, for this top, we'll consider inflation-adjusted sums to make a fair comparison between old and recent films. Let's continue. The Force Awakens featured Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher, who returned to play Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia, respectively. The film was first talked about in 2012, following Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm. Now, while the box office was a success, Disney didn't involve George Lucas in the creation of this new saga, keeping him as a consultant, which resulted in good yet mixed reviews. Number 9, Dr. Zhivago. From outer space, we land in early 20th century Russia. Dr. Zhivago was released in 1965, and I imagine you're too young to have watched it, so here's a synopsis. This film tells the story of a married doctor who enlists to fight during the Russian Revolution. However, during the war, he meets a young nurse with whom he falls in love. It's based on a book by Russian writer Boris Pasternak that was banned by the Soviet Union for romanticizing part of Russian history, which didn't prevent Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer from filming this story in Spain. It grossed $248,200,000 in 1965, which adjusted for inflation is $2.244 billion worldwide. Directed by David Lean and starring Omar Sharif in the main role, Dr. Zhivago received mixed reviews from critics, the most controversial being that it focused too much on romance and trivialized the historical context of the Russian Revolution. What do you think? Will you watch it? Number 8, The Ten Commandments. Oh yes, even though it's very old, you've probably watched this movie at some point in your life because it's just legendary. It tells the story of the biblical character, Moses, from the time he was rescued from the waters by the Pharaoh's family until he rebelled against the Egyptians to lead the Hebrew people across the Red Sea. Starring Charlton Heston and produced by Motion Pictures Association and Paramount Pictures, this 1956 film managed to gross a miraculous $122,700,000, which, adjusted for inflation, multiplies to $2.368 billion, like fish. Now that's impressive. As is the Academy Award this film won for Best Visual Effects in 1956. Critics of the time, such as The Hollywood Reporter and Los Angeles Times, did nothing but praise the film and applauded Heston's performance, stating that there could have been no one better to play Moses. Finally, it was said that watching this film was practically a religious experience. Number 7, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. You've probably heard the phrase, E.T. phone home, or seen this finger scene. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial was such a huge hit in 1982 that it grossed a stratospheric $792,900,000, which, correcting for inflation, is $2.501 billion. Some will say, so much fuss over a weird little Martian. Well, this film, directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by Universal Pictures, won the Academy Awards for Best Soundtrack, Best Sound Effects, Best Visual Effects, and Best Sound in 1983. Its plot is simple, tender, and with a lot of tension. A childlike alien stranded on Earth befriends a boy named Elliot who tries to hide him from the government. Lots of joy and crying in between. It all culminates with E.T. and Elliot escaping from the authorities and this other legendary flying bike scene. Simply unforgettable. Number 6, The Sound of Music. This is the highest-grossing musical in the history of cinema. Produced by 20th Century Fox, The Sound of Music from 1965 collected the harmonious amount of $286,200,000, which today would be equivalent to $2.562 billion. It was one of the most popular films of its time. It's based on the book The Story of the Trapp Family Singers, which tells the true story of a family that fled from the Nazis, emigrating to the United States, where they made singing their profession. The film focuses on the story of a young woman who was preparing to become a nun and was sent to help a retired widowed naval officer raise his 7 children. This comedy managed to win the hearts of the Academy, winning awards for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Film Editing, Best Score, and Best Sound. So if you like musicals, you can't miss out on this film. Number 5. Avengers Endgame. All good things come to an end. That was how in 2019, all Marvel movies up to that point aligned towards a single goal: defeating the evil Thanos. In 2018, Avengers Infinity War told the first part, which made the world couldn't wait to know how this story would end. This anticipation translated into the super-heroic amount of $2.811 billion that was grossed with the release of Endgame. Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, and others had to join forces one last time to fight a battle that was already lost and bring back half of humanity. While the Marvel Cinematic Universe is still expanding, Marvel Studios, Disney, and the directors, the Russo brothers, did not fail when they orchestrated this masterpiece as a conclusion to the previous 21 superhero movies. Hopefully in the future, they'll surprise us again with a production of this magnitude. Number 4. Star Wars. If The Return of the Saga ranked 10th, here's the film that started it all. Released as Star Wars in 1977, its success was so great that it collected the astronomical sum of $775,800,000, which today would be $3.59 billion. Also in 1997, it was renamed Star Wars Episode IV: A New Hope to make a second trilogy of Star Wars films, which would later become 3 trilogies in total with the one Disney produced years later. What a cultural impact Star Wars had! It starred Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, and Carrie Fisher, whom I already told you about, and who became sci-fi legends after this film. Of course, in 1977, there was no Disney, only George Lucas, Lucasfilm, and 20th Century Fox to bring this epic saga to life. Surely you've heard the phrase, "Use the Force, Luke." After all, Star Wars is referenced everywhere, and new series and movies derived from it are still being produced. A success from another galaxy. Number 3. Titanic. If you were asked directly and without warning what's the highest grossing film in history, you'd probably answer Titanic. This masterpiece, written and directed by James Cameron, was so appealing to all audiences in 1997, it grossed a glorious $2.2 billion, which would now equal $3.96 billion. Starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, Titanic tells the story of young love between Jack and Rose, who belong to opposite social classes and meet on a luxury liner that sank in 1912 when it collided with an iceberg. This film swept the Academy in 1998, winning in 11 categories such as Best Picture, Best Director, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Visual Effects, Best Original Song, Best Sound, among others. Wow, now that's a lot of gold. That's why many consider it was here that DiCaprio emerged as a star, and Celine Dion, who sings the main theme, was immortalized as a musical eminence. Number 2. Avatar. Everything James Cameron writes and directs is simply wonderful. 12 years after Titanic, Cameron, again with 20th Century Fox, released Avatar in 2009. Can you believe it grossed $2.847 billion, which today would be $3.273 billion? An out-of-this-world amount. That's exactly what this movie is about, where Earth, from a very capitalist point of view, intends to devastate another planet in search of resources, for which they use technology to insert their minds into the bodies of natives to negotiate. Although, should that fail, they also brought with them traditional and persuasive weapons of war. Not only did Avatar set the world thinking about failed culture clashes, but everything about its execution was so well done, it won Academy Awards for Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Visual Effects. Now, its sequel is coming, which will arrive in December 2022 under the name Avatar: The Way of Water, and is sure to be another masterpiece. Before meeting the first position, I can't help but mention these 6 movies that almost made it into the top. Furious 7, the 7th Fast and Furious installment from 2015, managed to gross $1.516 billion. The Avengers, Marvel's first superhero crossover movie from 2012, brought in $1.518 billion. The Lion King, the 2019 remake of the Disney classic, pulled in $1.656 billion. Jurassic World, the return of the world's most famous dinosaur saga, made $1.671 billion in 2015. Spider-Man: No Way Home, The return of the Spider-Man from the previous films in 2021 grossed $1.901 billion. Avengers Infinity War and the first part of the end of a stage of the MCU managed to collect the sum of $2,048,359,754 in 2018. Now you're ready to meet the most lucrative production of the seventh art. Number 1. Gone with the Wind. Let's go straight to the point. It was released in 1939 and at the time grossed $393,400,000. However, this amount adjusted for inflation becomes an insurmountable $3.724 billion. Can you believe it? It's been over 80 years. Directed by Victor Fleming, it's based on the book of the same name written by Margaret Mitchell, which was published in 1936 and won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1937. The film won Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Special Award, and Technical Achievement, among others. Like Titanic, this is a complicated love story, set during the Civil War era in the United States, where the main characters are in love but engaged to other people. Will the uncertain paths of life manage to reunite them? Here's the premise and some images. Although old, this movie is so far the ultimate romance, even more so than Titanic. Have you ever watched Gone with the Wind? Tell me in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to my channel. I have content for all tastes. Check it out. I know you'll find something nice. See you in the next movie adventure.